If you're a smaller life science or biotech company, running a phase 3 clinical trial can be a make or break endeavor. These late stage trials are pivotal, large scale studies that determine whether a new drug can win FDA approval. But they're also expensive, complex, and extremely high risk. But phase 3 studies are especially consequential for smaller life science companies because a failed phase 3 can jeopardize the very survival of the company if it has just one or a very few candidates at its disposal. If you're lucky by this stage, your company would have already found a partnership with a big pharmaceutical company that can help you through this stage. But if that's not the case, then this video is for you. This guide will walk you through how to better prepare for a phase 3 trial in the US and what to anticipate along the way. Understanding how phase 3 trials work and some of the challenges you'll face is the last major test before a new drug gets regulatory approval. And unlike phase 1 or phase 2 studies, phase 3 studies typically enroll hundreds to thousands of patients and may last between 1 to 4 years. The goal is to definitively demonstrate that your target drug is efficient in the target population for which it is intended for. And because of the scale of this study, there are a lot of unique challenges that you would have to face, which include things like ensuring consistent trial conduct across many sites and recruiting enough eligible patients, as well as managing mountains of data and maintaining compliance over the various years of the study. It is also enormously costly. Phase 3 studies in the US are the most expensive part of drug development. They often exceed over $20 million for a single study. And if you're a smaller company operating on limited funds, the stakes are extremely high. So, a successful phase 3 will pave the way for an FDA new drug application and a potential drug approval. But any major mistakes could mean loss of the entire R&D investment. So here are a few planning steps and considerations for you as you start your phase 3. The first thing is looking into your study design and picking the best endpoints that you can optimize. You and your team will need to spend a lot of time crafting a rigorous protocol. This is to ensure that your phase 3 trial design is built on the lessons of your phase 2 and choose the right patient population. By now, you should have confirmed the optimal dosage and selected the endpoint that is the most clinically meaningful and which will satisfy the FDA's requirements. So, if you inadequately design your protocol or poorly define your endpoints, then it can doom the study from the start. A few common design pitfalls that we see include using a sample size that is too small to detect the drug's effect, or picking endpoints that do not clearly demonstrate patient benefit, or picking inclusion exclusion criteria that do not match those used in earlier phases. So at this stage, you want to engage with statisticians early to determine the appropriate sample size and analysis plan. The second thing you should be working on is aligning with the FDA or getting regulatory input directly from the FDA. In the US, it is wise to involve the FDA early in your phase 3 planning. After a phase 2, a lot of companies can request a meeting. It's often known as the end of phase 2 meeting. And the goal of this meeting is to get FDA guidance on the phase 3 clinical trial design. An even more formal option is to seek a special protocol assessment or a SPA where the FDA will review and essentially agree to the protocol that you intend to use for your phase 3. During the special protocol assessment meeting, the FDA will also provide feedback on the primary endpoints that you should be optimizing for before you start. Securing FDA buy-in on critical elements like entry criteria, endpoints, and analysis plans can greatly de-risk this trial. Another thing you want to be doing before going into phase 3 is doing a risk assessment and contingency plan. Phase 3 is a long, complex journey, and you have to assume that things will go wrong, and you have to plan accordingly. Delays or surprises can come from many different angles. It can be slower than expected to enroll patients. You can have a high number of patients that drop out. You can have manufacturing issues within the drug supply chain, or you can have a lot of protocol amendments. And a lot of companies are often not prepared for these unforeseen circumstances. It is easy to be very optimistic during planning, but experience has shown us that teams need to be aware that this really isn't the best time to be optimistic because things can and will go wrong. you also need to have a very robust site selection strategy because selecting the right clinical sites is vital in planning, and that can make or break your trial. Don't automatically go for the most sites as possible. Your focus should be on quality over quantity. It's often more cost effective to use a manageable number of high performing sites rather than dozens of sites that only enroll a few patients each. Underperforming sites can drain resources and time that may require extra monitoring or even replacement during the study. So it's important to vet sites thoroughly to ensure that they have access to the right patient population that you're looking for. You also vet for past enrollment performance and compliance track records within the sites that you select. And the final thing when it comes to planning for your phase three is to go over your operational resources and align with your partners. If you're a smaller company, your internal team is most likely very lean. So decide which aspects of the trial you want to outsource to experienced partners. This could be your CRO of choice or specialized vendors for trial management, data management, biostatistics, and more. Engaging with a CRO can bring a lot of needed expertise in running a large trial, but choose carefully and do your due diligence on CRO candidates. The most important thing, however, when planning for a phase three is aligning with the FDA. You need to work closely with the FDA. As discussed, getting FDA input in your phase three protocol design through the meeting, which we have come to know as the SPA or the Special Protocol Assessment Meeting, is highly recommended. But regulatory engagement doesn't end there because throughout the trial, you need to maintain an open line of communication with the FDA for any significant changes or findings. If you find any unexpected safety issues or if any problems emerge, then you can consider modifying the protocol. It's often wise to confer with the FDA before you do this or before you change anything with the FDA or before you change anything with the protocol. Remember that the FDA ultimately wants trials to yield clear, reliable data on safety and efficacy. And so aligning with them serves your interest too. So take advantage of the FDA's willingness to answer questions at various stages of the development process. As you're engaging with the FDA, ensure that all of your ethics and IRB approvals have also been put in place. So ensuring that all necessary ethical reviews are in place, especially in the US, that will mean obtaining approval from an IRB board for your protocol at each site or using a central IRB board. No patients can be enrolled without an IRB clearance. It's equally important that any protocol amendments during the trial must be reapproved by an IRB board, and failing to adhere to these ethical guidelines or regulatory procedures can have serious consequences, including having your trial suspended or even terminated by authorities to protect patient safety and rights. Now you may be thinking, this is too much, and it is. So you need to make sure that you have a proper place where you're storing all of your documents, and not just the documents from regulatory authorities like your IRBs or documentation from meetings with the FDA, but also you're finding a very good place where you can store data that is coming in from these trials. Phase three clinical trials generate massive amounts of data, and that will form the core of your eventual new drug application submission to the FDA. So it's crucial that you maintain high quality data and documentation standards throughout the study. You can do this by using a validated electronic data capture system that ensures that case report forms are properly designed to collect all required efficacy and safety data, and also perform ongoing data cleaning as the data comes in. This will make eventual analysis easier and also keep you compliant with the FDA's data integrity expectations. Another strange thing that happens in the US is regulations are always changing. And usually this can be around when there is a new administration, as we're seeing, or just when things change, like if we have a pandemic. So you need to stay ahead of these changes. The FDA periodically updates guidance, rules, or standards for running clinical trials. So make sure that you're keeping ahead of any of these types of expectations that may come up during the course course of your study. Now, let's talk about a very major thing that you would have to consider before running this study, which is recruiting the right patients for this study, and not only recruiting them, but keeping them in the study. Enrolling the target number of patients is often the toughest operational hurdle when running a phase 3. In fact, only about 31% of clinical trials meet their original target, and enrollment shortfalls are a leading cause of clinical trial failure or delays. So, to combat this, you need to implement a very robust recruitment strategy from the start, which can include finding investigators or providers who are champions for the study, or connecting with patient advocacy groups or patient registries, and also utilizing other types of outreach and advertising if appropriate. And continuously monitor enrollment rates at each site. If a certain site is lagging, be ready to intervene by changing that site or finding another site that may provide you with the patients that you're looking for. So always have backup sites ready. And finding patients is good, but keeping them is just as important, because patients or participants dropping out can also undermine your statistical power and lengthen the trial as you try to replace them. So, improve patient retention by making the trial as patient friendly as possible. For example, you can ensure that visit schedules and procedures are reasonable and clearly explain that to patients. You must maintain frequent communication with the patients or the participants, can be directly or through the site staff, to keep them engaged. So you may incorporate different tools like a newsletter, or even set up a mobile app to set up phone reminders. For a lot of studies in the US, you will have to provide reimbursement for travel and other trial related expenses. And this can also reduce the dropout rates, because then you motivate patients by paying them for any out of pocket expenditures that they may incur by taking part in your study. On the topic of recruiting and retaining patients, sites are very important at performing this task, but it's also important that you have a strategy to monitor the sites and maintain some sort of quality control over their activities. Because while the sites focus on enrolling patients, rigorous monitoring is essential to maintain data quality and protocol adherence. Establish a site monitoring plan that will dictate how often monitors will visit sites, review data, source documentation, and verify that the protocol is being followed. Because protocol adherence is critical, and any deviations can introduce bias and put the results or the data coming in from your study at risk. So, monitors should confirm that informed consent is being properly obtained, that key endpoint measurements are collected per protocol, and that the investigational new drug is handled properly at every site that is included in your study. For a lot of companies, one of the decisions you'll have to make as the sponsor or the life science company running this clinical trial will be to select a data collection platform or a data capture platform. This platform is what you will make available at the level of the sites, which will be used to collect data for your study. So you'll need to ensure that your EDC platform is very well designed and that the sites are trained on it. There are a lot of different types of solutions for this on the market, and your goal will be to evaluate all of these and choose the best one for your budget or for the needs of your specific study. If you're working with a CRO, you can also provide guidance with them. But for a lot of CROs, they already have some of these systems in house or partnerships that can help you with getting the right sort of clinical trial management software to be used for your clinical trial. And as the study is ongoing, especially because this is a large study, safety oversight is the continuous responsibility of the sponsor. So you need to set up a very robust pharmacovigilance process to collect and review any sort of adverse event reports from the site. Serious adverse events must be reported to the FDA and the IRBs within the required timeframes. So you need to set up a system that can handle that reporting, and regularly monitor the accumulating safety data for any other concerning trends that may not directly translate to an adverse event. If you have not yet, you may need to set up a data safety monitoring board and heed to their recommendations when they tell you to review any sort of problems that may be arising. I spoke earlier about things potentially going wrong, and that's something that you need to be prepared for. And managing some of these problems may mean that you will have to put up with a lot of changes. So it's important to figure out how to manage these changes while upholding the overall integrity of your study. Over the course of a lengthy 1 to 4 year study, changes are almost inevitable, but they must be managed carefully. So, if you need to amend a protocol, for example, to adjust dosing or eligibility criteria, you first need to assess the impact of that protocol amendment on the overall trial integrity. And you can do this by consulting with the FDA if it's a significant modification. And any amendments must be communicated to the site and the RB, and any additional training that may be required to implement these changes needs to be done. A really important thing for a lot of companies is to build a very realistic budget with a contingency plan. You can start, first of all, by itemizing all the expected cost of the trial. So, major cost drivers, which will include things like site fees, which is the money that you pay the site for startup fees or for the participants taking part in the studies. You also need to assess for CRO or any vendor contracts that you may be engaging, as well as other costs like drug manufacturing and distribution. To do this, you can get quotes and benchmarks from a couple of companies to inform your estimates. For example, you may want to know what the typical per patient costs have been for similar trials. And it is critical that you do not forget to keep a contingency. This contingency is just what you keep for what if something goes wrong, and something will go wrong. Experts have advised that you always keep between 10 to 20% of your overall trial cost as a contingency and hope that it doesn't get used, but you just never know. It's better to have money that doesn't get used than to run out of money mid trial. So, to ensure you don't run out of money, the first thing is you have to secure sufficient funding before embarking on a phase three. Ensure that you have access to the capital required for the full trial. And given the high cost of these phase three trials, a lot of smaller companies often raise funds from investors or from partnerships with larger pharmaceutical companies. Or you can obtain grants as well for this stage. But the good thing about phase three is in this environment, investors are keenly interested in whether a company can efficiently use the capital and are excited to fund phase threes because phase threes have already demonstrated some sort of progress from a phase one to a phase two, which is always a very positive signal. So, if you're a company running a phase three for the first time, I hope these tips better prepare you for that study, and good luck.